Hello, hope you're doing well today. I'm just gonna tell you a couple words about one of the most common structures in the in chess, right? That structure happens especially often in the Queen's Gambit, one of the most popular openings, and the structure is, it is called the Casbat Formation, right, or the Casbat Structure. So okay, I'm gonna start and explain you what Casbat structure is. Later, I'm gonna tell you what are the basic plans in the Casbat structure, and when there is a Casbat structure on the board. And in the end, I'm gonna show you also a couple of games and how grandmasters were playing in the Casbat structures, because you can learn from the best. Okay, first of all, what Casbat structure is. Casbat structure is something that happens. It can happen in two different ways, right? It can happen also in the, as I said, in the Queen's Gambit, if takes. You can see that we have got a pawn in the center. We have got, one has got one pawn in the center, black has got one pawn in the center, and you can see that there are like one pawn is here and another pawn is here. There is kind of this imbalance in the center, as you can see, right? And most probably later white plays somehow e3 c6. Yeah, I'm not talking right now about pieces, I'm just talking about pawns. And you can see this is like a very typical structure. We call it Casbat structure. So you can see that it can happen. It happens usually from the Queen's Gambit exchange variation, but there is also another version that it can happen. It can happen, for example, even if white starts e4. Okay, black plays c6, so this is Caro-Kann. Okay, black plays d5, takes. Okay, and later white plays c3, black plays e6, and you can see that this is the same pawn structure. Also, we can call it Casbat pawn structure. Of course, you can see that the difference is that pawns are, now black has got the e pawn, white has got the c pawn. Okay, so this is Casbat pawn structure. Okay, next thing is, what are the main plans in such a structures? Okay, I will take pieces off the board because I want you to focus not on the pieces. Of course, pieces are there, but I want you to focus on pawns, because what is really important, how should you play with pawns? So when you have got such a pawn structure, there is like a very famous plan that you can do that is called minority attack. Because you can see, take a look on the queen side. Black has got 3 pawns. White has got only 2 pawns, right? So black has got pawn majority there, right? But in this specific pawn structure, it's a really good idea to attack with your pawn minority. So you usually try to go there. You try to go something like, a4 and things like that. Of course, you need your pieces support, and you want to play b5 because you want to attack that pawn that is supporting central pawn. This is like a critical point that you want to put pressure on, right? So this is very, very important. And why is that such an important thing? Because if you play b5, let's say, and now take a look, that black captures somehow, you take it back. You can see that white creates a big weakness at the d5. It is called isolated pawn, and this is like, white can of course attack it. In case that black doesn't capture that, white captures, and black captures, and you can see that there is a weakness on the c6. We call it backwards pawn. Of course, later we want to attack that with pieces. So you see, you want to do that minority attack because you want to create a weakness, isolated pawn or backwards pawn, and later use your pieces to put some pressure over the pawn, and in the perfect game you can win the pawn, and you can be up a pawn. Okay, so this is like minority attack that white's supposed to do. But what black is supposed to do in such a position? Black also has got their own minority attack, but of course on the other side you can see that black has got 3 pawns here, white has got pawn pawns there, and now black is trying to start minority attack. Of course, the main target is that pawn. And similar story, black is moving that pawn forward, And now if white captures, black somehow captures that, there is a weakness, an isolated pawn at the d4. And in case that white doesn't captures, you can see there is a weakness at the e3, backwards pawn, right? Okay, so this is like a very typical plan. You also need to know that, of course, if there is the second, because we are talking that Casbat structure comes usually from the Queen's Gambit, but the Casbat structure that happens in the Caro-Kann, it's reversed. White usually is trying to do minority attack here, and black is trying to do minority attack on the other side. Oh, okay. Okay. So now you know what is a Casbat structure. You know what is the basic plan. That was pretty important. You need to know, it's like, you know, a fun fact that the name Casbat structure comes from the name of the village of the town, that there were pretty strong chess tournaments in the late 19th and early 20th century, and it was played very often there, right? Usually not from the Caro-Kann, but usually that from the Queen's Gambit. Queen's Gambit were played pretty often, and that structure happened a lot. This is why we call it, and even there is a name, Casbat structure. Yeah, okay. So now let's take a look at some games. We are not going to watch games from those tournaments, but let's take a look maybe at the one game that was played by, you know, the strategical master, former world champion, Anatoly Karpov. Okay, let's take a look. I want to focus especially on that what happened right after the opening, because you know that in the opening you have to develop your pieces, you have to, you know, secure your king, move your pawns into the center, but what is gonna be very interesting, what happened right after the opening. Okay, so let's start. d4, d5, c4, e6. You can see that we've got a Queen's Gambit here. Okay, and now c takes d5, e takes d5. Okay, you can see exchange variation. Bishop goes to g5, bishop e7, e3 castling. Okay, bishop d3, knight goes to d7. You need to know that this is like the main line at the moment. Queen goes to c2, rook e8, castling, knight goes to f8. Okay, now white plays h3. Yeah, because white wants to take control over g4. White wants to stop that bishop from coming there. Bishop is coming to e6, and now take a look. White wants to play b4 because, you know, white dreams about minority attack on the queen side, as you can see. So but of course b4 at the moment is not possible because that bishop is there. This is the reason why Karpov captured. Bishop takes, and white plays b4 because you can see that bishop no longer controls that square. Okay, rook goes to c8. Okay, of course you can see that b5 immediately is not such a great idea because there is an x-ray, right? So you have to prepare this. So he started with knight a4. Okay, rook c7, and now rook from a to c1. You see, because that pawn is gonna be attacked later, right? So it's a good idea to bring more pieces to attack that on that semi-open file. Bishop e7, queen b1. Okay, queen retreats, right? You can see there is no x-ray anymore. You can see that pawn is protected, and also it supports b4, b5 move. Okay, bishop goes to d6, and white plays b5. So you can see that this is like Karpov also follows minority attack plan. Queen goes to f6, takes. Okay, and now you can see that white achieved, let's say, the first goal. White created a weakness at the c6. There is a backwards pawn, and white will try to take advantage of that backwards pawn. Also, what is important, that square in front of the backwards pawn, because if knight can move somehow, it's very hard to remove that knight, because you see, of course, bishop can take it, but then rook is gonna take it. So this is not a real problem, but the thing is that it's not possible for black to attack that piece that is at the c5 with a pawn. Okay, he started with knight h2. Of course, you can see that there was a threat bishop takes h3, right? And, you know, removing of the defender because that pawn is overloaded. Knight h2, queen h4, okay, and he decided to play bishop f5. Okay, white cannot forget also about the defense, right? Because there were some weird threats like bishop takes h3, so bishop goes to f5, stops that threat. Takes, okay, exchange, and now knight can go back, and now black plays, okay, what a surprise, f5, as you can see. So black is also doing their own minority attack. Rook goes to c3, white is trying to double rooks there, okay, knight goes to d8, protecting c6 pawn. So now it doesn't make sense to bring another rook because white cannot get the c6 pawn because it's well protected. So white played knight to c5. Okay, bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, okay, knight e6, rook goes back, and now f4. Okay, so you can see white is attacking that pawn, but also black played f4, and black really wants to capture that pawn and later attack e3 pawn. So the question is what white can do at the moment, how white can delay black's attack. And now a really good answer for that question is e4. Push that pawn forward. You can see that queen supports that e4 pawn, and yeah, that f4 pawn is also blocked, right? You need to know that the e4 idea happens also. This is like, you know, minority attack is the idea number one. From time to time, I'm going to show you one of the Carlsen's game that he used that e4 idea in a slightly different version. Okay, h6, rook goes to e1. Okay, so white starts to attack in the center. Rook e7, and now you can see that there is not protected pawn at c6, so rook can take it. Takes. Rook takes e4. Okay, queen d5. And now you can see that after, you know, this small battle in the center, white is up a pawn, and now, so this is like a pretty good, pretty clear advantage. So now it's a good idea. I mean, now white has to, you know, exchange some pieces, go into the endgame, and to win this slightly better endgame. Rook has to retreat, of course. Okay, queen f5. Okay, black is trying to take advantage of that pin. Okay, queen e1, queen d5. Okay, king goes to h1, very safe move. Queen d6, and now queen d2. Okay, black is trying to do something. Black is trying to activate some pieces, but of course it's a good idea to exchange. So takes, and now white queen can take also another free pawn here. Okay, and you can see that white, if I'm not wrong, white is up like 2 points. Okay, queen goes to b4, knight takes there. Of course, you can see that it's not a good idea for black to capture the rook because there is queen f7 attacking those things. Takes, queen d2, g4, and h takes g4, and at this moment black decided to resign. You can see that yeah, you know, we just watched this game until the end, but the most important part was right after the opening when white made the minority attack. White delayed black's attack on the king side, and white captured that pawn at c6, right? And of course, the last thing that left was how to capitalize that advantage. That was the last thing. Okay, so this is Karpov's game. Let's take also a quick look at the Carlsen against Anand, two extremely strong players. Okay, so it was d4, knight f6, c4, e6, as you can see, knight c3, bishop b4. Okay, we've got a Nimzo Indian here, e3 castling. Okay, knight goes to e2, d5. Okay, but you can see that the structure is gonna be black retreats, and we have got okay, there is still knight at the d5, but pretty soon white is going to capture. Black's gonna take it with the pawn here. Okay, white is developing, knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, and now you can see that there is like a pawn structure. You can see that still we can call it a Casbat pawn structure, but you need to know one thing, that now it's not gonna be that easy to make this minority attack here, because okay, you can push that pawn forward, but that pawn's gonna be backwards. That's true, but you cannot attack it That's the problem. So Carlsen has found a slightly better way to play in this position. But okay, before that, white of course has to castle first. Okay, bishop b4. White is exchanging that pretty bad bishop at d2, right? Because you can see that bishop at d2 is very restricted by pawns. So this is not a good idea to keep that bishop. So white wants to exchange a very bad piece. Okay, knight f6 castle. Black probably didn't want to capture at the b4, because if bishop captures, pawn takes, and white has got half open a file, and together with the half open c file, it can be pretty annoying. Castling, okay, rook e8, rook goes to c1, okay, rook goes into the half open file, c6, exchange, rook captures, okay, and now rook goes to e1, okay, trying to develop something, knight f4, okay, bishop c8, queen a4. You can see that white is attacking that pawn at the c6, rook c7. Okay, and now here was the question. A very good idea, still, even if Carlsen did not play this, a pretty decent idea would be to push that pawn forward, right? Like b4 and then b5, typical minority attack. But in that specific position, probably Carlsen was a little bit afraid that in the moment that he's gonna play b5, black can react with the c5 move. It's like a similar story like in the Karpov's game, because Karpov somehow, when black played in the previous game f4, white, pushed that pawn forward, and that attack was black's attack was in trouble, I have to say. So because Carlsen was afraid of this, so in this Casbat structure there is also another plan that it's a more risky plan, but from time to time it's a good idea to do that. White can also play e4 somehow. Of course, it requires some preparation, but the e4 move, okay, it's pretty dangerous, because after if black takes, white somehow captures that, white has got an isolated pawn. But a good thing about this plan is that white's pieces are extremely active. And let's take a look what happened in this game. Of course, e4 immediately is not a good idea, because white cannot exchange that light square bishop for the knight, because knight is gonna take it. So this is not a good idea immediately. So white plays f3 first, as you can see. f3 prepares e4. Bishop goes to e6, and now white immediately plays e4. Okay, you can see there is, for example, also a threat that that pawn will go to the e5. Okay, takes. Of course, black cannot allow for that fork. So white plays, black plays queen d7, and now white can, hit in the center, d5. Take a look. White is trying to take advantage of very active pieces. It's and playing d5, it's really helps. Take a look what happened after that. Oh, black has to take it. Of course, firstly, white captures that queen, rook takes, and now it's not maybe a very bad idea to capture that pawn, because most probably black cannot take it, but that might be because of the pin, right? You can see that if black captures that, rook goes c to d1, and that knight is in trouble. Also, you need to know that that move doesn't help, because white can take it here, and after all of those exchanges, there is like okay, what a surprise, back rank, checkmate. So that plan doesn't help black. But I think that after e takes d5, Carlsen was a little bit afraid of bishop f5. And of course, white is up a pawn. No, white's not even up a pawn. White has got a strong pass pawn here, but and white is slightly better. But there is there is a better plan. White captures that bishop, pawn takes, and now bishop goes to h3. You can see bishop is pinning that pawn. Of course, it's attacking e6 pawn, and now black is in trouble, right? In case that black goes like this, white can take it this way. And you can see what a beautiful coordination between rook and the bishop. You can see that that looks really nice. Okay, king goes to h8. pawn goes to e5. Okay, knight g8, bishop takes e6. You can take a look that white takes the first pawn. Okay, rook goes back, and now what is a good idea? Rook on the 7th rank is a great idea. So rook goes to the 7th, and after this move, bishop goes to d7, and black decided to resign, most probably because it's pretty hard to stop that pawn, that e-pawn from promoting. I'm not even talking that white is up on the material. No, still again, white is not up, but that pawn is so strong, right? Okay, it looks like white has got a huge advantage. Anyway, let's also take a look at one more game. Yeah, I just want to focus maybe on the, maybe not, we are not going to take a look the whole game because there were like a pretty long end game, but I want to focus on that what happened in this Casbat structure right after the opening. You can see that this is like a pretty old game, as with white it was Pillsbury was playing, the one who was very famous because of this Pillsbury's ring. But okay, let's take a look. d4, d5, c4, e6. Okay, knight c3, knight f6. So far you can see that we've got a standard queen's gambit, knight d7. Okay, knight f3 castling. Okay, takes. Okay, bishop goes to d3, c6. And as you can see, it's not a surprise today, we have got Carlsbad structure. Queen c2, rook e8, castling, knight goes to f8. And if you remember, at the same position, first game that we analyzed, Karpov played h3, but Pillsbury decided to play something like knight e5, right? Okay, knight goes to e5. By the way, you need to know that Pillsbury's ring is if that pawn goes there, it was like a yeah, Pillsbury was very famous of playing with such a pawn structure, right? So this is Pillsbury's ring, but opponent probably doesn't want to let him do that. So black played knight g4, trying to exchange that very powerful knight. Of course, f4 right now it's not possible because e3 is hanging, g5 is hanging. Too many problems. Bishop takes e7, queen takes. Okay, exchange, bishop takes, and now rook from a goes to e1. You can see that looks like white is using that plan, that white will try to use the plan of e4, because I told you that it's a pretty, also this like second popular idea. It's a risky idea, but still possible. Because after e4 there's gonna be an isolated pawn, but if pieces can be but white's piece is gonna be pretty active. Okay, queen f6. Queen f6 is stopping that e4 move because d4 pawn is hanging, but you need to know that there is also another plan, a4. So white starts to do something on the queen side. Rook e7, b4. Okay, so you can see that because e4 idea was stopped, you can see you can see that white is trying to do the minority attack. Okay, rook e8, white plays b5. White is trying to make a weakness here. Okay, queen g5, and now you can see that if white doesn't pay attention and white captures, that is a pretty powerful move, bishop here. Maybe it's not lost, but you can see that this is pretty annoying. White, I think, has to go there. There is like queen h5, and of course white cannot take at b7 because after queen h3 this gonna be over, as you can see. Okay, so of course this is not possible. So Pillsbury wanted to stop it. He decided to play f4. You can see, okay, that pawn is kind of weak. Maybe from a strategical point of view that wasn't the best way, but at least king is quite safe. Most probably much better idea to stop black's plan was just simple king h1, but okay, he decided to, it was Pillsbury's, right? He has to play f4 in his game. Okay, queen f6. Okay, and now of course you can see that e3 pawn, this is a backwards pawn, so queen goes to d2. Okay, bishop goes to f5. Okay, and now of course white wants to continue attack on the queen side because it's not possible to do anything on the king side. White can capture, but he figured it out even better plan. You can see that later there's gonna be possible to push that pawn a6, and completely like destroy the queen side. Okay, queen goes to g6. Of course, bishop at the d3 is hanging at the moment. Exchanges, and now white plays a6. Right? You can see it's like a very strong attack there. Pawn takes at the b5. Knight takes there. Okay, you can see that now, of course, it's not a good idea for black to take it there because there is knight d6 with a fork. Okay, so it was like queen d7, pawn captures b7. Okay, of course, it's not a good idea for black to capture here because there is rook b1, and if queen goes somewhere, okay, queen has to retreat somewhere, white promotes, and white has got a very big advantage, right? You can see that it was like the rook b1 is like a funny skewer. Okay, so black played a6, knight c3, queen takes b7. Okay, let's take a look at a couple moves more, because you can see that at the moment white has got that backwards pawn. That's true. This is why probably that f4 wasn't perfect, but you can see that black has got also two weak isolated pawns, and those pawns gonna be later like a target for white's pieces in the endgame. Here, okay, rook is coming to c1. Okay, queen d6. Queen is trying to escape from that. X-ray. Knight d1. You can see pawn now is pretty safe. Knight g6 with some annoying threats like this, right? And if pawn takes, there is like rook e1. There is like a tactical motive, so he plays in a safe way. g3, h5. Okay, so now queen goes to e2. Attacking here, but at the same time it's attacking a6. Okay, h4, queen h5. Okay, you can see that may look that queen is attacking the king, but actually it's also putting pressure over that d5 pawn at the moment. As you can see, takes. Okay, knight retreats. Then knight at g6 was completely useless, and now white plays rook c5. You can see white is attacking here. Also, later white is going to attack that pawn at the a6. Okay, rook d8, and white wants to double rooks on the c. Okay, g6, queen f3. Queen keeps an eye on that weak pawn. Knight e6, and now Pillsbury decided that it's a good idea to play rook c8. To be honest, if I were white, I would probably prefer to go there with a small fork on the queen and that a6 pawn. Okay, king g7, exchange, knight takes, and now another piece is coming to the attack at the d5. And now you can see that after rook d7, there is knight c3, and for black it's not possible, right? It's white by using that minority attack, white created a weakness, an isolated pawn, and now white is just using their pieces to attack it, right? Attack that weakness. Knight e6, queen takes d5. Okay, queen b6. Okay, rook goes to c1. He has to retreat somewhere. Okay, knight goes to f2. Okay, now I will just maybe show you what happened until the end, but the most interesting part, how to proceed with that minority attack, is over, right? White has got the advantage. Queen d2, okay, queen e5, okay, and now f6. f6 probably was like a small blunder because it was like takes, and you can see there is knight e4 fork, right? So you can see that tactics is also pretty important because it's pretty, yeah, black helped white a lot. Okay, g5. G5, by the way, it's a pretty interesting move because black knows that the best chance for them is to exchange pawns. If black can manage somehow to exchange all of the white pawns, even if black loses that pawn, that knight, and that pawn, rook and the knight against the rook, it's a draw. So so this is like black's plan. But of course, Pillsbury is aware of that. Takes, okay, and now knight takes f4. Takes, king takes, but there is still that pawn at the d5. Of course, Pillsbury cannot let black capture that pawn because it's gonna be a draw. Okay, rook d7, knight c4, of course, is blocking that thing, and after king e4, d6. you can see that white is using the last best pawn. King d4, rook is going to c7, okay, here and now d7. Now take a look at the moment. Rook is protecting here, is attacking there. Knight is controlling those squares, so it looks that the last chance for black is to use that road to move the king back. So he went there, but there is rook c8, and black decided to resign at the moment. Because you can see that after rook c8, of course, white captures, and white promotes the pawn. And in case that black plays rook takes d7, there is like a pretty nice fork, and white is winning material, and white is also winning that pawn. And at the same time, yeah, if you know how to checkmate with the rook, it's not a big challenge for you to win this position. Okay, anyway, so to sum up, to conclusion, if you have to remember two words, two things from today's lesson, when you hear Casbat structure, you need to know, you need to think of the minority attack, right? And in those games that I showed you today, that I presented those games today, I wanted to show you how strong players were using those things, right? So hopefully next time you will get the Casbat structure, you will know exactly what to do. Thank you very much for watching. Again, I just want to remind you that you can, if you like that my content, you can visit the website guide.matbobula.com, and I'll be very happy if you can join my newsletter. Once a week you will get an information about the new content. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and hope to see you next week. Bye.